I'm the seed of a soldier, executive ruler, and I'm absolute to my people the way I maneuver. Subdue my foe for the circle 7 and scimitar. Carthaginian bloodline, indigenous lord. I'm the seed of a soldier, executive ruler, and I'm absolute to my people the way I maneuver. Subdue my foe for the circle 7 and scimitar. Carthaginian bloodline, indigenous lord. Supreme law, you know I'm reppin', man. And you rather see me white clad and dressed in all black. Or 70,000 swift angels ride camelback, full and materialized, enforcing 7 acts. And a magistrate mandated to be AGS. And I feel the trillings in the flesh, and nevertheless. And I know the best is yet to come through my DNA. God body pedigree, I'm just paving the way. It's all smoke with dirty moles in the afterlife. It's hellfire torment, so devils walk light. And when you move to and fro within my omnipresence, I'm landlord, ever present, so count your blessings. My ways and means and my methods, my sacred weapons. My muftis on deck and they all stepping through all these L's and days, deific willing ways. We can raise a nation of 60 million from shallow graves.
Yes, sir. Peace and love, family. Peace and love. Want to rise upon the 7th and give praises to the great God, honors to the great God, whom we call Allah, our Father God Allah, and honors to his holy prophet, honors to my holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali Al-Hajj, Sharif Abdul Ali, that is. Give honors to my Moorish kin once again, here, there, and everywhere. And therefore, honors to all of you who are continuously honoring yourselves by being yourselves. Give honors to my Grand National Seal, Grand National Emblem, National Flag, Divine Constitution, and bylaws. And honors to all of you who are living manifestation and personification of everything. And I do mean everything that our holy prophet brought to make us a nation. I just want to come forth to you, Moorish kin and family. You know, all of you out there who are listening and subscribing, so to speak, and following me. I have a grand measure to bring forth. As you can see, it's entitled The Stolen Legacy of an Ancient People Usurped by Greek and Roman Machinations. You know, and for those who don't know what machinations are, it has to do with plots, it has to do with intrigue, you know, and so forth and so on. I think it'd be proper to use that terminology as opposed to any other terminology, because most people wouldn't take you serious, you know, when you use certain terminology. So I'm going to be going into a grand drawing. What I want my family to do as they come in, you know, is definitely share this special video, you know, subscribe, you know, and all is well, all is well, you know. So what I want to do right now, while I'm sitting here, I want to actually give our Moorish kin a grand drawing. And while I'm doing this, I want to make sure that I give our family some insight, because we're going to put some real good information out here. So give me a chance to share this link a little bit. I'm going to have to get me a little team or something going on here where I can have people doing this stuff for me in the background. But I'm building from the ground up, family. So, you know, all is well, all is well. Let me get to this link. And as I'm getting to this link, you can expect to have some grand insight being brought to you. So I hope you got your paper, your pen, and everything else on the manifest. Let me see. Okay. So let me drop this link here. And as soon as I get it in here, we're gonna give you some grand insight. You're gonna love this. You're gonna love this. Okay. And I got to put in this particular measure here. I got some things I really want to put to rest when it comes to misconceptions. So that's what this particular video is all about. But that's what this particular video is all about, family. Okay. I know I did have a little noise coming through my little screen too when I touch it. I'm so used to touching this little screen right here, but it do have a little noise coming out of it here and there. I'm gonna have to get me a little mouse or something. Touch screen ain't always good, is it? Okay, let's see. I'll make sure that everybody getting this that need to get it, and then we will proceed. I hate the fact that every time I put something in here, it actually drops down. Okay, there we go there. Let's see. Okay. Make sure you share this link, family, if you're looking. So that everybody can get some of this truth. Make it go viral. Make it go viral. When I send it to you, you send it to the world. Okay. Okay, so what we have in regards to dealing with this special subject matter, again, the stolen legacy of an ancient people usurped by Greek and Roman machinations. I want to take the time out and give honors to our beloved brother, G.M. James, who wrote a grand work, and it didn't take a whole lot, pages, so to speak, for him to tell the truth, but he most definitely told it. So I'm going to lay my basis, with a reading from this particular book. And this is actually coming from the appendix because it makes things more condensed at the time, and I want to get to exactly what it is I'm here to present. So the brother stated argument 1, Greek philosophy was stolen Egyptian philosophy. He states, because history tells us that the teachings of the Egyptian mystery system traveled from Egypt to the island of Samos, and from Samos to Croton and Elea in Italy, and lastly from Italy to Athens in Greece, and through the medium of Pythagoras, some people say Pythagoras, but anyway, it says in the Electic Ionic philosophers, accordingly, Egypt was the true source of the mystery teachings, and therefore any claim to such origin by the ancient Greeks is not only erroneous, but must have been based upon dishonest motives. History also represents the early life and education of Greek philosophers as a blank and their chronology as a matter of speculation. Consequently, it has given the world the opinion that the Greek philosophers, with the exception of 3 Athenians, might never have existed and might never have taught the doctrines alleged to them. In other words, history represents the pre-Socratic philosophers as questionable in existence, and under those circumstances they could neither produce philosophy nor claim its authorship, except by questionable and dishonest methods. See, that's what we want to talk about, the questionable and dishonest methods, that were demonstrated when it comes to dealing with the history. The compilation of Greek philosophy appears to have been the idea of Aristotle, but the work of the alumni of his school, right? It says the movement was unauthorized by the Greek government which always hated and persecuted philosophy because it was Egyptian in form. The organization, control, and operation of the mysteries have the Egyptians the right, or gave the Egyptians the right for himself of ownership to philosophy, and therefore any claims by the ancient Greeks to philosophy must be considered as illegal and dishonest. Right? Argument 2. And I'm going to stop with argument 2. The brother says so-called Greek philosophy was alien to the Greeks because the period of Greek philosophy, Thales to Aristotle, was a period of internal wars among the city-states themselves and external wars with their common enemy, the Persians. The Greeks were victims of perpetual internal strife and perpetual fear of annihilation by their common enemy. They had no time which they could devote to the study of nature, for this required the richest wealth of the leisure classes, but they were too poor to engage in such pursuit. This is one of the reasons why the Greek philosophers were so few and why the Greeks were unacquainted with philosophy. The Greeks did not possess the native ability essential to the development of philosophy. The death of Aristotle, who had inherited a vast quantity of books from the library of Alexandria through his friendship with Alexander the Great, was also followed by the death of Greek philosophy, which soon degenerated into a system of borrowed ideas known as eclecticism. This system contained nothing new, in spite of the great treasure of knowledge which they had obtained through Alexander's friendship with Aristotle and his conquest of Egypt. The Greeks rejected and persecuted philosophy owing to the fact that it came from an outside and foreign source and contained strange ideas with which they were unacquainted. This prejudice led to the policy of persecution. Hence, Anaxagoras was indicted, escaped from prison, and fled to Iona in exile, and Socrates was executed. Plato fled to Megara to the rescue of Euclid, and Aristotle was indicted and escaped into exile. This policy of the Greeks would be meaningless if it did not indicate that philosophy was alien to Greek mentality. You know, when you get into this special measure, and we're talking about, those claiming to be Greek philosophers and so forth and so on, our beloved brother G.M. James did a great job of showing, that they didn't even have the time to commit to any type of serious study, in nature, for all these things that have been claimed by them. Not only that, but when it comes down to dealing with this so-called philosophy, there is no founded basis in regards to dealing with it. And so most of the people now that's running around talking Greek this and Greek that, they only learned it from, westernized textbooks, that were written by people who was just really following suit. So when it come down to dealing with the measures that the brother has placed in here, and showing how these ones were actually persecuted. And it's strange that they were persecuted for the doctrine, and then the doctrine was named after the very people that was persecuted. How can there be a Greek philosophy when the Greeks didn't even agree with the philosophy? From our brother, goodness gracious, I had a gas. Greek philosophy. If it wasn't Greek philosophy, how could they take this title? One second. Okay, yeah. How could they take this title of a Greek philosophy when in all actuality it was the Greeks that was in opposition to this special measure? That's my question, first question. Think about that for a minute. It's impossible to name a philosophy after a people who are persecuting you for the philosophy that you have on the manifest. Um, Another measure, the Greeks themselves are so-called philosophers tell you that they got their teaching from Kemet. They never claim this teaching as their own. They never claim this teaching as their invention. So how is it that our people, that have been taught these things have accepted these things? What I want to do, I'm going to share my screen because people often hear me say there's no such thing as Greek, and Roman, because right now we actually in the process of rewriting history. We want to bring our people out of that mystery mindset and bring them into a clear conception of their own history. That's the goal. So I'm sharing my screen here. I want to make sure you get this. Again, this is coming from the Egyptian Adeptus Research Sultanate, brought to you by myself, and most definitely sponsored by the Moorish American government. So I want to start right here. First and foremost, the very name Greek or the name Roman, again, is a machination. It's all a part of the plot, to superimpose, for the European to superimpose themselves into an ancient history, attach themselves to a history that they can call classical, you know. And so this is where all this special measure come from. The name Kiftihu, is actually the ancient name of the people that we know today of as Minoans. The people that were Minoans were known as the Kiftu. You also had the instructions. You know, these special ones, were the ancient indigenous people to India. So we're going to kind of cover both of them together, because there is some overlap between the two cultures, and we want to let you know who these people originally was. So the Kiftihu, as you can see, I actually placed a 7 in the midst of one of these plane spheres that they actually have in representation of the civilization they established. And I like that, the way it had it looking like a quadratic circle. So I placed that there, to put the seal on it. And you can look at these ones. If you notice, look at their, the hair, the way you see these special measures. This is nothing new. You see the long length to it. And they are actually drawing on the pyramid. So this Kiftiu are the original names of these Minoans. Here's another picture of them here. Let me kind of hold that up a little bit. That's another picture of the same people right there. You see? And as you can see, they were most definitely melanated. Ain't no doubt about it. So these are the people you think of, because the Minoans are those who were the ancient indigenous inhabitants of what they like to call Greece now. I want to bring these things on the manifest because some people like to say the Greeks wrote this and the Greeks wrote that. No, it's the ancient Minoans known as the Kifitu, the Kiftihu, who actually brought these things on the manifest. So this means that this is our people. Everything else that came later, they are our children, are the people that descended from our ancestors, so to speak. Some of our people, let's put it that way. So the main measure on why it's needed to establish who these people are, again, this is another name for the ancient Minoans in the Egyptian language. These are the people that later became known as Greeks. So we don't see no Europeanism up in here as far as dealing with these engravings or the inscriptions that are showing the people. So we can get that out the way. Now let's come to this particular measure, because this is what brought this particular subject matter up. It's a lot of people that keep giving credit to the modern day Romans that they are calling Greeks, so-called Roman or European or whatever you want to call them. Under this machination, they are trying to bury the true nation of the people that were there or indigenous to that land. And so anytime you let a criminal describe a crime, and I talked about this before, he ain't gonna never tell you nothing that he done did to the victim. He gonna make it seem like the victim was the actual criminal. So that's what's going on when you deal with this so-called Greek philosophy and this history that's being taught, out of textbooks in the West. So when you look at this special measure here, and you look at this alphabet, notice it has the alphabet of the Coptic that comes first in the Greek alphabet. You can see, with the exception of a few alphabets that they took out of here, outside of that, they basically the same alphabet. You see, one just missing a few. In other words, it's 32 letters here, and then you got the exception of what they brought forth and what's missing from the 32 here. You see, but when you look at all of these letters, family, they may be drawn a little bit differently when it comes to the way they cursively wrote it. But in all actuality, you're talking about the same script. So how can you call this Greek alphabet? I keep asking people this. How can you call this Greek alphabet more ancient than the Coptic alphabet? And then turn around and say, well, these letters was actually added on. No, that ain't how it go, family. That's the way they taught you over here in the West. That's the way the Romans teach you. I don't buy that. You can see this is an original alphabet chart because it has the abjad, the ABGD, sequence in it. That is the DNA of all languages that go back to our mother tongue. But I'm going to show you how deep it get. Because people say, well, when you deal with the ancient language, and they like to talk about these hieroglyphics, we're going to dispel that as special measure too. Yeah, you got to deal with the hieroglyphics, then you go to Hieratic, and then you go to Demotic, and then you go to the Coptic. This is what everybody agree on. For some reason, even though Coptic is supposed to come right behind the Demotic, so to speak, somehow they always end up coming up with this, so-called Greek influence on the Coptic. And I'm going to show you where they get this from. It's going to be a later period, after I go through showing who these people are, so nobody make no mistake about who these people are. So ones don't go against information because they have deemed it, something wrote by the Greek people. I'm showing you that not only were the original people usurped, but a lot of things that we are giving the European credit for under the name Greek and Roman, a lot of these things come from our people. So we are canceling our own culture because we are accepting somebody else to be our people. Again, we are canceling our own culture because we are accepting somebody else to be our people. Remember, let's go back to this. The original inhabitants, the Kiftihu, you see, these people are the original people that were known later as Minoans. So these Minoans later, the people that come after them known today as so-called Greeks, their history is not as rich as the ancient people that were there. So going back to this measure, here's an excerpt, and this excerpt is from an individual by the name of Dr. Murray. And he was writing on the Coptic. It says, Dr. Murray says the Coptic is an original tongue. Notice it is an original tongue, for it derives all its indeclinable words and particles from radicals pertaining to itself. Its verbs are derived from its own resources. There is no mixture of any foreign language in its composition. See, that's why I like to take classical sources that's, from the time maybe 200 to 300 years old. This man is telling you, right? It says there is no mixture of any foreign language in its composition. Then it says except Greek. So in other words, Greek and the particular foreign components of what they're trying to talk about, they claim it comes from these people that's calling themselves Greeks now. And I can say they just took away from the alphabet. They took away from the original alphabet, and it was 32 in the Coptic. So these are, this would make, we can say, a haphazard alphabet, to where the alphabet is no longer full because they done took something from it. Anytime you add or take away from it, it's still along the line of an admixture of something that somebody else tried to throw off in there. But nevertheless, the Coptic, he's saying, is derived from his own resources. It didn't derive from the Greek. This new remix that they want to call Greek, is what his foreign element by interpretation comes into play on the default, right? It says Zosimos. It's quoted by Fabricius. It says that the Old Testament was translated into Egyptian, right? When the Septuagint translation was made. They never told you that, right? They told you that it was Greek, didn't they? Because they couldn't find the original so-called script. See, that's all a part of the machination. And this ain't the only source that'll tell you. I was in my last video, I was showing, my live, I was showing that a lot of the Old Testament was translated out of Semitic language. You see? But that's a whole nother measure and for a whole nother matter. We'll get to that another time. You know what I mean? So they're saying that these things came from Egyptian. So how could a language known as Greek, which didn't even come from the Egyptians or the Kemites, be used to encode a text that's not Kemetic or a text that's not Egyptian? That don't make no sense. So if Coptic was the last form of the Kemetic language until Arabic came in, if you say this, then why do you keep saying that Greek is where Coptic come from? That's another way and a reason why it don't make no sense. You see what I'm saying? Because the European has superimposed himself into this history, in order to make you think that he is as ancient as our ancestors and ancient as us when it comes to history. We got to stop participating in the cancellation of our own culture. And I'm only putting a record out here so you can get it. I know it's still going to be some Greek lovers, after this special measure, but I'm just putting the truth out there for you. So when you hear about these different Greek organizations and Greek this and Greek that and so forth and so on, like our brother G.M. James stated, how can you call a philosophy Greek when that philosophy, the people who persecuted those who was teaching this so-called philosophy didn't agree with the philosophy? So how would it be Greek philosophy? What was it called before it was called Greek philosophy? Ask yourself that question. Because that's where all this praise is coming from. I want to show you a picture here of the Etruscans. And this is a depiction of them during the ancient time. You can see their hair on their head, you see the beard, and you're going to see that this was a common element. These were the original indigenous inhabitants, that would have been of those of the ancient ancestors to Rome. So even when it come down to those who are called Roman, the Italians and so forth, and so they look just like our people. And a lot of this has to do with going back to understanding who the Carthaginians are, understanding who Hannibal was, Septimus Severus. You have to have knowledge in this special area to understand. And this deal with a little Moorish history, that one has no knowledge of. So look at these things. If you notice something, that's a whole lot of hatred. See, what people fail to realize, family, look at it, how they knock the noses off these special demonstrations, right? In most cases when that's done because these cover-ups. It's the machination of trying to keep the people from knowing who these people are. But unfortunately, there are relics and busts that are still on the manifest, coins and everything that show you who these people are. So no matter how somebody try to hide this, you can't hide it. I'm going to give you another drawing. A lot of times, family, when you receive so much hatred from a people, especially when it comes from those who have, the racists measure all up in their DNA, a lot of it has to do with the fact that a lot of these people having the money to travel, going all around the world, after being taught what they've been taught, after perpetuating the lie, participating in the machination, when they go into Kemet and they see these deities or what are known as gods, their history go back over 1,000 years old, and they look at them and they see you on the wall, family, when they see you on the wall. And then when they go to England and they go to France, they go to Rome, they go to so-called quote-unquote Greece, and they see you in these places. Do you know what that does to one after being told that you was a slave? And then they go over there and find out that, the ancient deities that were worshipped by these people in all actuality were you. Do you know what that does to the mind? You don't know it because they got the money. They can travel anywhere they go. Everywhere they go, they see you. They see us, family, written in stone. You can't remove it. And then they go and look and see that this demonstration, according to carbon dating and, all types of scientific, dating, it says again that this is you. Every time they looking at science and looking at who the original man is, it's coming back to you again. So ones can act as if, they are superior, but in all actuality, the inferiority complex is already there. And so you have people that get angry with you because of this. You see? And so they do things like blow noses off of, certain monumental expressions. We've seen it all the way back to Kemet. We know that when Napoleon went into Kemet, we know he didn't just go in there. It wasn't on a war measure. He was really going in there to basically see how he can Europeanize something. He wanted to place his mark, on Kemet, on Egypt. And he was able to do that by establishment of the Masonic order that he took part in bringing on the manifest. But that's a whole nother measure. So nevertheless, when these people see you, family, everywhere they go, when they traveling, the same people that have been, hated, and it ain't just them, it's other people too. It's the Arabs, it's different people of different countries. They feel some type of way when they see you, on the wall, when they see your inscriptions all over in areas during the time of pre-Islamic Arabia. Assyrians, the Turks, all of them, when they look, at ancient relics, they see in you. So this is where the problem comes in. So there comes the machination in most cultures, because now we have been deemed, the worst there is on the earth. Like Job said, I have become their byword. You know what I mean? Men that have been put in derision in ancient times. Now, they talking down on me, talking bad about me. That's what was demonstrated in the Piscean record by Job, right? So nevertheless, this is what we see going on. And so the world is often debriefed. The internet make things spread so fast now to where it's now being said, We the most hated people on the planet. But yet and still, even in our ignorance, you have people that try to imitate us. People still trying to destroy us, cancel us out of our own culture, and take our culture and run to the forefront. Even in our lowest state, and being as ignorant as some of our people are, at this special time, we are still the cream of the crop. At our lowest now. So imagine what we are at our heights if we ever return to that. You think somebody want to see that again? Do you think that it's individuals out there that's going to allow you to be carved in stone if they got something to do with it again? No, they're going to create a different narrative. So that's what we're talking about when we say machination. This ain't a old me type of demon. This is just historical fact. It's historical fact. We ain't going at nobody because of their nationality or race, and that ain't what we're talking about. We're talking about history. It's the same reason when you go on a job, it's more other people than it is your own people. But that's a whole nother measure. So going on, this is a bust or a coin of Hannibal. Look at it. Now, he pretty much fathered these special Romans, right? Original Carthaginian. This is the depiction. Do that look like anybody else on the planet, family, that you know of outside of our people? I mean, very virtue of the elephant being there, we already know what time it is, because we know that elephant, to Hannibal, was what a tank is now to the United States. You know what I mean? That's how our ancestors came in. They came in on them elephants. You know what I mean? Yeah, so here's certain pictures here as well dealing with the same Etruscan people. We already can see that. We ain't got to put nothing else on that, to prove that. That's another picture of an Etruscan. I see that this one actually has on, an African style garb too. You see? You notice that? Yeah. This one actually has on the African garb. But that's a whole nother measure. So look at this picture here. This is another one. Look at the melanated one. Look at all the melanin in these ones. See, these are your original Etruscans, that were later known as Romans that I'm showing you now. Here's another picture, of, those that are known as the Minoans or, the Keftiu. You see him? This would be known as one that was in the Trojan War, so to speak. But you see him? Do you see anything, that lacks melanin about this particular expression? There are many more. Here's another one. This is an Etruscan here head, and this is from 700 BC, right? 700 BC. Here's another one. Melanated is ever fading out a little bit, but we see that one has, the hair, just as we showed you earlier in the beginning, going back to Kemet. They actually wore locks, as well. They actually wore locks as well. I actually showed that too in one of my measures. Matter of fact, I'll show you in the end because that's going to be one of my last slides. Okay, so that's another picture of an Etruscan. This is Terra Cotta Relief from 600 BC. Look at the features. See, all this is putting in, all that garbage to bed when one's talking about Greeks and Romans, they wrote this and they wrote that. No, it was the Etruscans, and the Keftiu, who wrote these things and brought this history on the manifest way before the European got there, that y'all calling Greeks and Romans and so forth and so on. You see, here's another Etruscan. And this is from 500 BC. Notice that when you come from, the time up here to 700 BC, and you come down here to 500 BC, 200 years later, they still melanated, right? This is another Etruscan. This is 500 BC. Still there, That's another one. That's the one I showed you earlier, but that's 430 BC. That was in the first group I showed you. Now you have those here that, like I said, they call them Romans. Notice his feature is just like the rest of them that I showed you when it comes to dealing with, the hair, the curliness of the hair and so forth and so on. That's another one too. Right up under that, that's an Etruscan of 500 BC. Good and well, that ain't no European. So all these things, that we seeing right now, I didn't want to just show one or two because somehow people think that's just a few here and there. I'm showing you what they all look like during that special time period. Now you can take it and run with it and go wherever you want to go with it, but I'm showing you what it is. Now if you go in opposition after this right here, something wrong with you. So here's a Roman bronze, and this is from 100 AD, way later than the ones that I showed you. And look at the people. They still look the same way, don't they? Look at these pictures. There's another bust with the nose blowed off. This right here is from 200 BC, and this is a painted vase in the form of a head, of a youth in Alexandria, 200 BC. So we looking at what the people look like. We don't see this on movies, and so our minds have been influenced, by Hollywood. So we can't accept it. That's another Roman youth. I know y'all done seen people that look like this. These people, these faces look real familiar to me. Look like I seen these people from this special era in time. These are like the doppelganger of, these people. Everybody got one. I even seen the one with Lil Wayne, Michael Jackson, but these actually look like people. I can see the youth in some of these people. It looked like somebody I know. So again, here's some more. Man, that blood of Hannibal was real strong. Him and the Moors, that went over there in that particular area. Whether you know it or not, they call Italians Roman niggas for a reason. That's what they call them now. And they know their history. They know where they come from. And the reason why most of them, when you deal with people like the mob, they so sharp when it comes to warfare and all that. Where do you think that come from? Stratagems that come through the lineage that was passed down, because Hannibal was one of the greatest strategic men it ever was. So that's where they get into that art of warfare and so forth. That's where it comes from. But he brought it straight out of Africa. You see what I'm saying? So next time you go to talk about Greek this and Rome and that, put it in proper perspective. Put some respect on the name of your ancestors, family. The Etruscans and the Kiftihu. These were the original inhabitants of Greece and Rome. I even have a picture of Aristotle, and I showed that in my last presentation. And it's the depiction of the Arabs. They showed them looking just like these ones here, as dark as ever. It don't take long to tell the truth. There it is again. That's a lot of hatred, family. We know that this is our people. These are the original indigenous inhabitants of these places, family. all these things here, you know, is coming from those who were of the same bloodline. If you notice here on this one, it tell you this one was from 100 AD too, which is really after, long after the other ones, you know, and this is dealing with a measure that's dealing with the Carthaginian measure, you know, as well. You know, found in the Bardo Museum of Tunisia. Are those European family? I noticed their features are very strong. You know, their features are strong. We know good and well them ain't no Europeans. Now, that brings me back to here. Because when you go back even further, you see some connection when it comes to the language that they have. This is the language family of the Phoenicians, known as cuneiform, right? But on the side of this, you know, these are not cuneiform tablets. This is the actual ancient script of the Minoans. So we see that the Phoenician culture was also adopted by those who were called Minoans or the Kiftiu, right? So if we see that, this is going to establish precedence when it comes to dealing with the language a little later. You see, now that you know who the people are, and now that you see that they're how they was writing, and that they adopted, you know, a cuneiform type writing, that in itself is powerful. You see, but look at these Phoenicians. Look at them. You know, because they are basically ancient, and they ancestry, so to speak, crossed over all the way down into dealing with Hannibal, you know, all into Africa and so forth. Everybody know that it ain't strange. You know, we ain't got to go into that. We know about the Amaru. You see, we know about the Amaru, you know, the Phoenicians, the Mari. We know about those people, right? Here's another bust of the Phoenicians. And this is when they say the word more, Amari, you see me putting this up, Maharam. They say it came from the Phoenicians. Did it look like it came from a European to you? No. You see? Now look at the alphabet. This is going to be very key in a minute because I'm getting into it. Notice the descendant line that they put here. Notice this type of alphabet that they are using, the script. You're going to notice that this script dominated all those coaches that came afterward, because they actually like to call this, you know, ancient Greek as well. We're going to show you the hoax on that. You know, they call it Paleo Hebrew. But how can it be Paleo Hebrew when this is actually already Phoenician? Why not just call it what it is? You know, but that's what they like to do. You know what I mean? This is box Hebrew. You know, all that came from those who call themselves Jews and so forth and so on, superimposing themselves into somebody else's culture and history. So it's Phoenician. Look at the letters. Look at it. It's the same alphabet, family. If that is the same alphabet, why call it other than Phoenician? I'll tell you why. Because when cultures migrated, they took certain measures that they was from the culture, you know, indirectly or directly, and so they took their language with them. Or those who were amongst them took a language and they were a particular people and they adopted some of the language, right? But you can't take a whole language. That's just like somebody taking imagine this, somebody take the English alphabet and then they call it Arabic or call it by another name. That still don't change the fact that the English alphabet was what it was. So if this is Phoenician, look at this alphabet closely, family. Why does it need to be called by another? And that ain't the only name that is called by. You're going to see many people put their name on this script. Is that by chance or is that by design? It's also something you're going to learn about this Proto-Canaanite, Proto-Canaanite. You're going to learn that this is the language that was used by the European. You know, these particular scriptorial expressions that were adopted, you know, by the Canaanites, they wrote a script like this. They actually wrote a script like this. The Kemites didn't have a script like this, but the Canaanites had a script with pictorial expressions in them. And this is where they came up with their so-called hieroglyphics from. E. Wallace Budge did. You see? But that's a whole nother measure. So again, like I said, these people, that come through here, they named for the area of the Moors or the Mari was the furthest west. You see? Muharram, the furthest peak of the west. Now, let me show you the Etruscan alphabet. There's no difference between the Etruscan alphabet, you see, and the alphabet that I just showed you, but in small minor measures. They have the same style alphabet, and it shouldn't be a surprise to our family, to see that. I'm going to show you this chart right here. Notice it says Phoenician. So the Phoenician, again, is accounted here for this style of alphabet. Now you see small variations, dealing with certain changes, but a lot of this ain't different. Look, it says early Hebrew again, claiming to be Hebrew, but it was already Phoenician. Only difference is the way that these two F's right here were wrote, but it's still, a backwards F is what I like to call it anyway. To those who are looking, it ain't an alphabet F, so don't get me wrong. Don't get me misconstrued and say, oh, he called that F. I'm calling them backwards F's because that's what they look like. So, but even if you go to early Aramaic, look at this. Same alphabet, but it was Phoenician. So why not call it Phoenician? This means that the Hebrews adopted the Phoenician language. And this is called Paleo Hebrew to them. The Aramaic was adopted by them. Then the so-called early Greek. This is what they like to call archaic Greek. But guess what? This so-called archaic Greek, with the exception of twisting up a few letters here and there, not that many, it still go back to the Phoenician language. So you see what I mean when I talk about how one is trying to superimpose themselves into ancient history and then claim it as their own. Oh, it get greater than this, family. Classical Greek, which is basically the same thing with different variation. They want to switch it up a little bit. You know what I mean? A few letters ain't there, some turned different ways, certain different measures to make it distinctive among their people. Now, when you go to dealing with the Etruscans, right? Notice how they tried to put the Etruscans behind the Greek. But we know good and well that the Etruscans, were on the manifest earlier than them if we know the proper history. But that's how they do it. That's the way they do it. They've been getting away with it for the longest. Anybody that's writing history like that, of course they're going to do that. Look at your Latin, your early Latin. Come out of the same alphabets. And then it evolves all over here into classical Latin, and Russian took a little piece over here, the Germanic, Gothic, and then you got your English over here. You see? But it all started from here. This is the only thing I really care about when it comes to this, because this is the parent, this is the root right here. It was Phoenician before it evolved to anything. I ain't saying they don't have the right to write what they write. But I'm saying when your alphabet is identical to the source, it's not your alphabet. Even if you change one or two letters, it still belongs to the Phoenicians. Period. So here's another drawing. This is what I was talking about earlier. Notice it said archaic, Phoenician alphabet. Same alphabet system. We see them doing it over here. Again, these are the so-called Greek alphabets, again, borrowing from this alphabet. You see? So if you want to study the documents, that ones is writing, during the ancient time, then it's coming from, these are special Phoenician measures in most cases. that they call it Greek, with the exception. Only documents that are Greek according to them are the ones that they wrote in this particular alphabet here, that are missing letters in this one. But those ancient documents wrote like this that they've been trying to call Greek, man, that's thievery. That's stealing. Come on, family. We exposing this foolishness, right? Now let's go back. Again, Mesopotamia. Look at it. The same alphabet, Phoenician, Syriac. You can see all of it, in the same language. This is very important here because I want to show you something similar to this right here as well as we go on, because I'm almost done with my slides, right? We establishing our point, though. What they call the Paleo Hebrew script, again, it's the same script that you just seen up here. Facts. Only somebody that's disingenuous and don't want you to know the truth will tell you opposite of that. You see what I'm saying? Same thing. So why are we playing with ourselves, family? Don't let nobody do that. Don't let nobody play with your yo-yo. Now let's come over here. Oh, you thought it was over with? Even when it comes to dealing with what they call Proto-Canaanite, and they dating this from 1200 to 1050 BC, I don't trust the European timeline. I don't care about it, to be honest with you. Then they got Archaic Greek. This is a variation here, right? They just doing whatever they do with it. But nevertheless, they're trying to stay close to that parent Phoenician. This is classical Latin, evolving out of that. You see? Notice, and this ain't the pictoglyphs that they demonstrating that I showed you earlier, but we're going to get to them in a minute. So the Proto-Canaanite, what is called Paleo Hebrew by many different scholars, this particular script right here, again, is the same script. Same script that relates to the Etruscan, even though it has a little difference in the letters and so forth and so on, same script. Now, when you go to this special measure dealing with the Moabite stone, the Mesha Stele, same language being used here, even though this is called a different culture, the Moabites. So this was the dominant style of writing, family, demonstrated by the world over. And that language not only came from, the Far East, but also went into Africa when you deal with the Etruscans. Or you get into dealing with, all of those, the Keftihu. They all had an alphabet that go back to that. Look at this. This is called Libico-Berber. You can see the relation of Libico-Berber as well with these same alphabets, family, with the slight difference of a few characters here and there. It get even greater, though. This is the Punic Script, which is the script of the Carthaginians, which is also linked back to the Puntites and so forth and so on. Look at the inscription here. You see the hand of Fatima there. I can go into a whole bunch of measures dealing with this here, but we're going to deal with this one just now. We'll deal with the rest when we go to talking about the original ancient Cushites of Arabia, because we're going to do a measure on that as well and let you know that it was our people. So the same script is used there. Here's another expression of the Punic Script. Look at the Punic Script. You can see that they also adopted from that same ancient script that I showed you. Look at the similarities between these things. I can't make this stuff up, people. I can't make it up. Now, even when you come down here, and this is known as the Emerald Tablet of Tehuti, right? Which a lot of people think is just some fictional writing. But even when you look at this as special script, it's related to the same type of writing. It's relating to the same type of writing. But I'm going to show you something even greater, because you've been hearing me talking about the Ibero-Mauritians and the original inhabitants, of the area they call the Recat structure of Morocco, which is where it said the Atlantean civilization, was founded, in the furthest of West Africa, the Mahorum, as the Phoenicians call it, because the migration came from, the Far East, all the way, it went across to the West, and the civilization was set up here. This is where your Lemurian, Atlantean wars took place at, and so forth, and they said a portion sunk, and you can see right now in the recap structure, you got a whole video about it, go for hundreds of miles, the eccentric circles, showing you water was on the land. But nevertheless, they migrated all the way across North Africa, and once they got to that special measure, set up a civilization. When that civilization fell, it was said that Tehuti, an Atlantean, left there and went into the Nile Valley civilization, back to the Horn of civilization, the crater civilization, so to speak, and basically began to teach, also teach the Kemites, who at that time, were, we can say, not so into, the pyramid building at the time. We'll use that terminology for a lack of better words. So this is where the Nile Valley civilization ended up coming up. And so it's not strange when I spoke on the Iberian area, and I showed you Libico Berber. Look at this. Look at this. Now, this is known as Northern Iberian script. If you look at these symbols, family, and you look back at this emerald tablet here, you can see the relation to this. You can see the connections, to this measure when we talk about, the emerald tablets, and Tehuti being in Atlantis, which is in the west coast of Africa, which is where they found the oldest man to date, the oldest human, why DNA ancestor. You know what I mean? That special one known as Jebel Uhud. You see, found in the same area. I'm going to show y'all the video because people, I've showed it before, but I'm going to show you again, for those who think that this is just some made up folly. I showed you the maps of Lemuria in my last broadcast when I dealt with the Mari. So look at all of this, right? Look at the language. And again, look at this script. This script, not only does it attach again back to that Phoenician script that you see, but this is also very in line with the Atlantean script. So these are things that we have to really pay attention to, family, when it comes to dealing with, these special measures in relation to dealing with language. Now, this is very important. I'm going to show you something, another hoax. I keep telling our people that these pictograms that are symbols were not meant to be a language that our ancestors demonstrate. I keep telling you it's hieratic, Demotic, and then the Coptic evolved out of that. That's what this whole discussion here is about. Because I'm finna show you, why I keep telling you the Coptic, came before this so-called Greek that they talking about, because the so-called Greek is made up and the Coptic is the actual language. Just like I showed you, Phoenician is the actual language that the Greeks are claiming as their language. You see what I'm saying? Or the Europeans are claiming that the Greeks claim as their language. Eurocentric scholarship. You see? So look at these pictograms. These particular things known as pictograms in an alphabetical form were found in Sinai. This is the area where Moses got his tablets, Mount Sinai. Now these symbols we know come out of Kemet, right? But not as an alphabet demonstrated by the Kemites themselves. You see, the Re in Kim, is dealing with the hieratic family and going into the Demotic. That's the actual writing. They didn't write documents, that had to do with important things with this. This was a priestly demonstration that was meant to be understood through metaphysics. Now, what happened is those who were the Canaanites, ended up making this into an actual alphabetical script. And so what happened is E. Wallace Budge knowing this, coming into contact with this after it was done, by prior Egyptologists, he compared letter by letter, those symbols that he had, so that he would go into so-called translating, from these symbols. So he transcribed the hieratic into these symbols, basically what he did, because it was already a script among what they call the Proto-Canaanites, Proto-Sinai. And he tell you that if you go and read in his preface, that's where this so-called these represent alphabets come from. And if you notice here, they call them Egyptian hieroglyphics, right? But they saying that this Proto-Semitic script, Paleo Hebrew, and all this here, Mosaic hieroglyphic Hebrew alphabet is what they're calling it here. Look at when they saying it originated. They said it originated in the same time. And guess what? This is Alan Gardinier's sign list. He put these together, and E. Wallace Budge came forward behind that, and basically said, well, I did it because Alan Gardinier really couldn't make sense out of it himself. He was trying to use these more like markers to understand the letters they was demonstrating. So they really buried the true language of hieratic and demotic under the symbols. You see? And our brother Mustafa Gadala, has wrote about this. Very powerful demonstration. And so when I give our family a drawing on that, most of them get upset. I'm going to read you something from the work of our brother. Let me see here. And this is coming from the Egyptian letters of the creation cycle. This man is native born Egyptian, and he came to correct a lot of this. And I read this to a brother, and I put it up on the screen before, and he tried to twist the words. Listen to what he stated. And this is called the historical deception of the ancient Egyptian linguistics. He stated the hieroglyphic smokescreen. The biggest smokescreen in history is concealing the ancient Egyptian alphabetical writing system. Western Egyptologists made everyone think of the Egyptian language as a collection of primitive pictures called hieroglyphics. They concealed the Egyptian alphabetical system as the mother of all languages. Again, they concealed the Egyptian alphabetical system as the mother of all languages in the world. Here's how Alan Gardinier, you see it, I just quoted him, right? In his book, Egyptian Grammar, tried to rationalize how they concealed the Egyptian alphabetical system. In his book, Egyptian Grammar, Gardinier writes, Egyptologists have experienced the practical need of adopting some common standard to which different hieratic hands can be reduced. In other words, it was too great for them to understand, so they had to be reduced, in order for them to demonstrate. He says, and instead of selecting one simple style of hieratic for the purpose, these Egyptologists have preferred to transcribe all hieratic hands or letters into hieroglyphic. Ain't that backwards? Now they told you and me and everybody else that these so-called symbols that they call hieroglyphics, that they really adopted from the Proto-Canaanite, Proto-Semitic script, you see, of the Canaanites, they are telling you, family, that basically they had to create a way and reduce it, and transcribe from the hieratic into these symbols. You've been taught that they translated out of the symbol. No, this is the symbols they created. And they got away with it because there are many monuments that have these symbols upon them. But again, these symbols were never meant to be an alphabet. They represent a divine language that was meant to be explained metaphysically. They went and gave names to all these different symbols, and they don't have no clue that these people actually called these things this. And they had Coptic Christians, to help them do this. People that were not rooted in the Egyptian doctrine and so forth and so on. That's why I'm saying we got to rewrite the history. There's still much wisdom to be learned by the people instead of just going off what they told you and running with it because they put it in a systematic way that made it sound good to you. And all the while they was burying the true language up under the symbols, keeping the secret. So he went on, right? It said Gardenia's explaining and justification for burying alphabetical hieratic writings assures that there were various forms of writing for various purposes. The very same Western academies never used the same lame excuse with Greek, Roman, or any other language in the world. This lame excuse was only used in the Egyptian writings to deceive and conceal the ancient Egyptian alphabetical writing language. They didn't want you to know hieratic. They want you to be erratic, running around looking at, these symbols, trying to decipher them, while all the while they was translating from hieratic. You see, the documents they translated come from hieratic, and the other stuff that they so-called pulling out these symbols is straight guesswork and conjecture they created to make you think that they know something. How you gonna know something? You stole the papyri. E. Wallace Budge, you stole the papyri, wrapped it up in newspaper, and fled out of the place. That's like somebody going from here, don't know nothing about no Arabic, ain't no experts on no Egyptology, where Egyptology is they science anyway, but ain't no experts, on, the teachings of Kemet over here in the West, so you steal it and then go to putting your deciphering measures on it, which you really got from the Coptic. So you just casting, like he said, mere guesswork in there. I showed you in my last video. Come on, man. It says the ancient Egyptian, well, actually he said this. He said, there's not a single preference. I put a P on it. It said there's not a single reference prior to this in the 19th to the 20th century. Western Egyptologists' conspiracy that stated a relationship between hieroglyphics, pictorial signs, and the hieratic/demotic alphabetical signs. Notice he's making an emphasis on the difference between the pictorial signs that they created to hide the hieratic and demotic, which are the true alphabetical signs. So in order to transliterate or translate Kemetic works, you got to go into the hieratic alphabet and the demotic alphabet, which you don't hear a lot of Kemetic teachers demonstrating from. They only talk about what E. Wallace Budge translated, what Gaston Maspero demonstrated. It ain't nothing wrong with reading these different works, but when you gonna translate your own? And if you ain't gonna translate it, get out my way, because that's what I'm doing right now. I'm in the process of doing my own work. So that's another measure. But it says the ancient Egyptian alphabetical form of writing. The most eminent authority on languages, Isaac Taylor, in his book, History of the Alphabets, Volume 1, page 62, says, the immensely early date at which symbols of an alphabetic nature are found on the Egyptian monuments is in fact of great interest and importance. It is of great interest in as much as it constitutes the starting point in the history of the alphabet, establishing the literal truth of the assertion that the letters of the alphabet are older than the pyramids, older probably than any other existing monument of human civilization. Isaac Taylor, in his book, History of the Alphabets, Volume 1, page 64, wrote about the Egyptian king Sent. Not Set, but Sent, S-E-N-T. King Sent, in whose reign the alphabetic characters were already in use, may be taken to have lived between 4000 and 4700 BCE. Starting in as the result of such calculations may appear, it must be affirmed to be probable that the beginnings of the graphic art in the Valley of the Nile must be relegated to a date of 7,000 or 8,000 years from the present time. It is very clear that the ancient Egyptian alphabetical language was the first in the world, thousands of years prior to the much ado about nothing Sinai scripts. The more one studies the various languages and dialects of the world, the more it becomes clearer and clearer that there was originally one language that split into various tongues. I just demonstrated that. The Bible and ancient writers confirm such an original language because of false pride and prejudices of Western academia and religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, zealots. The origin of this universal mother language has been ignored. Evidence confirms that the ancient Egypt, right? Ancient Egypt is the single source of the universal language. On this subject matter, Plato admits the role of Egypt in his collected dialogues. It says, for now, we shall only refer to recognition of the Egyptian alphabetic letters, indicative of the unity of speech and script. It says, he, the ancient Egyptian Thoth, Tehuti, conceived of letter as a kind of bond of unity, uniting as it were all these sounds into one, and so he gave utterance to the expression and art of letters, implying that there was one art that dealt with sounds. So they're giving the credit to Tehuti. You see, and I showed you the emerald tablets, that was said to be inscribed by Tehuti here. You see, he was said to be the inventor of the letters. You can now see that I mentioned all of these derivatives in languages. You can also see that the hieratic and the demotic, can be traced back to the same style of writing. We're going to get into that in a little bit. I want to make sure you get this, though. He said, it is very clear that Plato did not refer to pictorial forms of expression, hieroglyphs, but rather to expression by individual diverse letters, each with its particular sound value. Other classical writers also stated that Egypt was the original source of alphabets. Most modern Western scholars affirm explicitly and implicitly that the ancient Egyptian alphabet and language is the oldest source in the world. In his book, The Literature of the Ancient Egyptians, German Egyptologist Adolf Ehrman admits the Egyptians alone were destined to adopt a remarkable method following which they attained to the highest form of writing, the alphabet. The British Egyptologist W.M. Flinders Petrie, in his book, The Formation of the Alphabets, page 3, concluded, from the beginning of the prehistoric ages, a cursive system consisting of linear signs, full of variety and distinction, was certainly used in Egypt. If you don't know what cursive system of that consists of linear signs, that's alphabetical writing in alphabetical script, not pictorial script, family. This was Petrie, a writer of Kemetic Egyptian dictionaries on Egyptology, so to speak. It says Petrie has collected and tabulated alphabetical letter forms from every different ages, and the earliest belong to the early prehistoric age of Egypt, probably before 7000 BCE. So this is even dating the script back further than what the Europeans say now. They say it's about 3000, 3100, 3200 BC. But the brother Mustafa Gadala is showing you that, they actually spoke on it being 70,000 BCE, also 10,000 years old. So it said Petrie also compiled from several independent sources, similar looking alphabetical letter forms from 25 locations in Asia Minor, Greece, Italy, Spain, and other locations throughout Europe. I did the same thing when I laid the alphabets out early. It says Petrie's tabulation of these alphabetical letter forms shows that 1. All alphabetical letter forms were present in ancient Egypt since early pre-dynastic eras, over 7,000 years ago, prior to any place else in the world. 2. All Egyptian alphabetical letter forms are clearly distinguishable in the oldest recovered so-called Egyptian hieratic writings, more than 5,000 years old. And he said so-called hieratic because hieratic has another name by which it is called, Kemetically. We'll get into that later. But it says the same exact ancient Egyptian letter forms were later adopted and spread by other people throughout the world. And I'm going to show you that in the end of this special measure. The ancient Egyptian texts reflect the high culture of the Egyptian language and people. German Egyptologist Adolf Ehrman, in his book Literature of the Ancient Egyptians, wrote, "As far back as we can trace it, the Egyptian language displays signs of being carefully fostered. It is rich in metaphors and figures of speech and cultural language which composes and thinks for the person who writes." The British Egyptologist Alan Gardiner, in his book Egyptian Grammar, wrote, "No less than salient or characteristic of the language is its concision. The phrases and sentences are brief and to the point. Involved constructions and lengthy periods are rare, though such are found in some legal documents. The vocabulary was very rich. The clarity of Egyptian is much aided by a strict word order. For pithness of proverbs, oracles, and sentences, no language can parallel with it. In axioms, maxims, and aphorisms, it is excellent above all other languages. For definitions, divisions, and distinctions, no language is so apt." And he even went into the measure in regards to dealing with the Egyptian is dead, long live Arabic, where they, are saying that this language is a dead language. You can't do nothing with it. And so Mustafa Gedala, he came, at this special measure because Arabic is said to replace Egyptian language. And this is what he said, according to the Western scholars saying that Egyptian dead, long live Arabic. He said, "It has been stated and repeated that the ancient Egyptian vocal linguistic system died and was replaced by a brand new language called Arabic. Nothing can be further from the truth." Alan Gardiner, in his book Egyptian Grammar, page 3, said, "The entire vocalic system of Old Egyptian may indeed be proved to have reached a stage resembling that of Hebrew or modern Arabic." And I'm going to show you that in the end of this special measure. It says, "To say that Egyptians speak Arabic is totally false and illogical. It is the other way around. The Arabs have long ago adopted and continue to speak Egyptian. A much detailed analysis of this and other languages in the world," it says, "as they relate to ancient Egyptian archetypal vocalic," it says, "an alphabetical writing system can be found in the ancient Egyptian universal writing modes by Mustafa Gedala, the same author." And last but not least, this is where I want to end that reading from this particular work. We want to make sure you quote me right when you quote me. It says, "The real and fabricated sequence of the alphabets. Western Egyptologists, contrary to all historical evidence, declared that they settled on an arbitrary selection of 24 letters to be the Egyptian alphabet." Did you hear this? Did you hear this? They chose these 24 letters in the forms of symbols. The European did that now. It says, "To further conceal the truth, they arbitrarily arranged their 24 letters based on frequency of use in text. They have never applied the same methodology to Greek, Latin, or any other language. Some contrary evidence was mistakenly left among these conspirators. A well-known reference atlas of ancient Egypt admits Egyptians had an orderly sequence of alphabet letters. Buried on page 198 of this reference, we read, the Egyptians dissolved their language into syllabatory. It says, and had an alphabetical order into which lists were sometimes arranged." And then he goes into the fact of the matter is that the order of the ancient Egyptian alphabet was the ABGD sequence. And that's what he's talking about. He's talking about the abjad. That's how you can tell. This is the DNA. See, they're using the B interchangeable with the V. ABGD, which gave birth to ABCD. If you see alphabets that are not beginning with this, they are not connected or have no relation to, the original language. You see? So this is abjad, is what they call it. So anyway, it says the fact of the matter is that the order of the ancient Egyptian alphabet was the abjad sequence. The Hebrews followed follow this sequence, and the Arabs only in the 10th century changed the AGBD sequence through a childish reshuffling of the Abjad sequence. And I got the Abjad alphabet, but I also have, the false order of the alphabet. And actually, that's the alphabet that used in most Qurans. They put it in a different Abjad sequence. Don't start with ABGD. It goes like this: Alif, Ba, Ta, Tha, Jim, Ha, Ka, Dal, Zol, Ra, Ze, Sin, Shin, Sa, Dal, Ta, Zor, Ain, Gain, Fang, Quaf, Kaf, Lam, Mim, Nun, He, or Ya. Right? But it starts with Alif, Ba, Ta, Tha. It don't start with, the Abjad. But there is an older alphabet in the Arabic that actually starts with the Abjad. And it's ABJD because there is no G in the Arabic alphabet, so the G is interchangeable with the J. So it should also be noted that in early history of modern Egyptology 2 centuries ago, scholars followed the ABGD sequence while working on Egyptian monuments, such as the work done on the Rosetta Stone, and later on they ignored it for their haphazardly created sequence. It was an additional and intentional confusion, pardon self, so that nobody would notice this obvious, that the ancient Egyptian letter forms are the archetypal letter forms for all other languages. You see? So, he even go into certain measures in regards to dealing with the, allegories and, esoterics of what the hieroglyphics, represented to the priesthood. But again, these pictograms, which are known as hieroglyphics, which were called that by the European, were never an alphabetical language family. Again, they hid the hieratic, they hid the demotic, because I got original script where it has the actual demotic, hieratic, and then it has the symbols. And the symbols was what they had reconstructed because they couldn't make out, because of the way the hieratic is wrote is so close together. They tried to use these symbols, per letter, and then call it hieroglyphics. They want to make it hard for you since it was hard for them, basically. You see what I'm saying? So let me go to another measure before. Okay, here we go. This is another expression. They got a different order here. If you notice, in this particular one here, they had the Egyptian hieroglyphics like they parented, these phonograms over here, as they call them, right? But in this particular chart dealing with the same alphabets, here you have somebody that come forth and put the box Hebrew first, which we know that's a lie. This did not come before this. So the projected Proto-Hebrew original letter, right? That's what they call it. Projected Proto-Hebrew original letter, right? Then they say Middle Egyptian exemplar. So they saying that basically the Egyptian, they saying it, that the Egyptian symbols came from this. And there are scholars out there that teach it. Them symbols that mean, and when I say Egyptian symbols, I'm talking about the way that E. Wallace Budge them demonstrated. All they did is took the Proto-Canaanite, Proto-Semitic alphabet that was adopted, because they had two. They had the Paleo Hebrew look that I showed you earlier, and they had this one. And this pictorial expression went along with their Paleo Hebrew alphabet, so to speak. You know what I mean? And so that was adopted because of those symbols and compared to the original hieratic the same way by, E. Wallace Budge and his camp. And that's how they created the hieroglyphics as a language. But these symbols, which like I say, they don't know, have no idea what some of these things mean. But what they should have been doing, is studying them even, better. When they have determinatives, they gave the determinatives certain names, because they were looking at the description. So when you look at these symbols on monuments and so forth and so on, a lot of these symbols have metaphysical, esoteric meanings only priests are capable of doing. Brother Mustafa Gadala got a whole book dealing with these type of breakdowns. You know what I mean? He did a great job on giving insight I'm gonna pull it out and give you some measures out of it real quick. And this is called the Egyptian hieroglyphical metaphysical language. And this is how I always demonstrated, these are special measures. This was not meant to be an alphabet. It's all dealing with, a breakdown. I ain't gonna go into the reading of that so much. So, but he went into example describing certain things, and the brother was going into the metaphysical significance of animal images, and he was talking about, for example, the bull leg, which was synonymous with the constellation of the Great Bear. And if you looked at the bull leg, and you look at the Great Bear constellation, is actually in the same special shape. I've showed this here. Let me show you real quick, because it may be somebody out here in the audience. Let me see. I'm gonna have to stop sharing this first. Okay. And I'm going to go here. Okay, into my, because I got a lot of this stuff in my photos. I got, like I say, I can teach, directly from here. And I'm gonna show you what I'm talking about, so we can make sure you got it. And when it speaks of the bull leg being in relation, and this is what I was talking about earlier too. I showed this before, but it's noteworthy since that's hieratic right there. That's the symbols that they created to try to reconstruct their understanding in relation to these symbols. They transcribe the hieratic into the symbol as opposed to translating, the hieratic from this. You couldn't do it because it didn't exist that way. And these writings have nothing to do with what they're talking about. This is a prime example of what I'm saying. I did an exegesis of all these symbols. I didn't need an alphabet to describe these. I actually used chapters of the Grand Quran. For example, the Surah Al-Fatiha called the opening. Notice I have the one here demonstrating the opening of the mouth ceremony. You see what I'm saying? And the opening of the mouth also relate to the constellation of the Great Bear, because that bull, that constellation, which is, also known as actually the mouth of God. That's a whole nother measure. But then it goes into Bakra. That's Surah 2 in the Quran. So it's called the cow. You see, I have the cow here, right? Just slight expressions, nothing crazy. It says the Ali Imran, which is the family of Imran. This is going back to the Amarna, Amin Ra. You see, Telamarna, right? Then you have the woman. So I have a depiction of the woman here. Then I have the table, There you go. Now I can go into great breakdown. That's Al-Anam, the cattle. You see the cattle there, right? It's as simple as that when you're dealing with these pictures. All these Kemites were doing is showing their day-to-day life. It wasn't meant to be taken like the European trying to make it. Now, how would I metaphysically interpretate this? Well, we see Al-Sar up here in the heavenly realm, but we also see Al-Sar down here on the earth plane. You see, we see the lights of Ra shining on the body, and this is special measure is to infuse the body, in preparation of resurrection. You see, we see, a whole bunch going on. We see that this is actually a pyramid, which is telling us that the pyramid is also a place of gestation where one is able to make contact with divinity. We see the serpent here, as a sign of division between the heavens and the earth, so to speak. Spirit in the heavens being raised from that special state. He's here, but the body is there. We can go on and on and on with it, but that's just one way of metaphysically interpreting these measures. But anyway, I'm trying to pull this drawing here. This is also actually That's the confession known as that scimitar, the leg of the great bull right here. You know what I mean? Also, I had it when one was being judged. You see it over here as well. You know, that's where the scimitar came from, the leg of the bull. When it said that Moses, killed, an individual, they say he used, the jawbone of an ox. In some areas, they actually say that he used the leg of an ox, which is a form of the scimitar. You see? So it's a lot of stuff in here that relates to that. Give me 1 second here. I want to get you down here to this expression. This is where I actually broke down the gate of God. Look at the inscription they use here. This is a determinative now. But this is supposed to represent the constellation of Meskheti, the great bull. See it there? But that's a whole nother measure. We ain't going to go all the way into that. But this is how I show you the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper both. Look at the tool of the opening of the mouth ceremony I showed you earlier. You see the 7 stars in the Little Dipper, the Big Dipper. You see? Leg of the bull. That's what was being referred to there when he said here, bull leg, the great bat. So then it has the claw of the goose, the head of the goose, the hinder part of the goose, the head of the lion, tail of the lion. All these things represent certain things. He said the ass, for example. The donkey, it represents ego and stubbornness, as in the aspect of the nether god Set. Set, the one who slew Osar. The ass may also represent hard work. It also may represent fertility, where the male has a very strong phallic erection, or whatever the case may be. He was getting into that measure. Also, Ba. The Ba is one of the metaphysical components of the human and other beings. He went into the Ba and the stork, and the mortality of that. And if you notice in this picture here that I showed you a few minutes ago, when I was talking about the resurrection of Osar, where is it? Let me get back to it. When I was showing you that, give me 1 second here. Okay, yeah, that's where I was. If you notice, the stork is present right here. We see the hawk there too, right? But the stork is present. And it says the Ba is immortal. It says, in the Ba departs the body and dies. The Ba is represented as a human-headed bird. It says, which is the opposite of normal depiction of Neteru gods and goddesses. The human body is said with the animal heads, in other words, as a divine aspect of the terrestrial. The Ba may be shown as a stork or a falcon. The stork is known for its migrating homing instinct. The stork is also known worldwide as the bird that carries newborn babies to their new families. The stork returned to his own nest with consistent precision, and hence a migratory bird par excellence is the bird chosen for the soul. Ba is usually translated as the soul. So you see the interpretation just dealing with that especially. That's how a high priest understand it. That's why in the teachings, again, of our teaching, it said that Yehoshua was placed in a room, with hieroglyphics written on the wall. And he was told to ponder upon the meaning of them. He wasn't told to, go into and interpret each alphabet. So pondering upon the meaning of these symbols had to do with metaphysical and spiritual understanding. They were never meant to be an alphabet and a European pull wool over your eyes when they told you that. You see? And so I done did it again. Let me go back here. Here we go, family. I think Rome working against me sometime because I was up here thinking I'm sharing and it didn't share. So anyway, like I was saying, they trick you to make you think that the language was being, that the hieroglyphics, so to speak, is the true language, but it was actually transcribed from the hieratic into that, which you can see they made up letters along the way because it's a lot missing. So Again, I'm going back to this measure. I don't even have to reiterate what I was going into. But here is where I was speaking of, where I went and I just lined some of the surahs of the Grand Quran up. Because I said the Kemetic exegesis of the first 7 surahs are sarahs of the Grand Quran. Qara'ani are the Qara'ani, which are words that are Kemetic, and we'll get into that. We know what the Ka represents. We know what Ra. We know what Ani is, the papyri, the light. You know what I mean? All this has to do with one being the book. So it says that Fatiha, the opening of the mouth ceremony, you see the instrument used, the Bakra, al-Bakra, the cow. You see Ali Imran, the family of Imran, right? You see Al-Nisa, the woman, Al-Ma'idda, the table, Al-Annam, the cattle. You see all of these things depicted here. And this is what I was speaking of earlier when I was talking about the stork representing the Ba, and also here laying, in the sarcophagus, so to speak, or laying to be resurrected. You see the rays of light shining down upon him. And then you see, his higher medium here. Though the body, is basically enshrouded, within their special temple on the earth, he is transcended. That's what that really represents if you explain it metaphysically. You see? So let me stop sharing this screen because I got to get back to another measure here. I want to make sure that I'm sharing it, because when I think I'm sharing it, in a lot of cases I wasn't. And it usually don't do that. Usually when I share the screen, it come right up. This is a measure dealing with where I got that particular chart from, where they were talking again about these so-called, Proto-Canaanite script or Proto-Canaanite scripts. So again, this is what a European adopted their idea of applying symbols to letters, because it was a script of the Canaanites. They didn't bring it out of Kemet. They invented it after seeing, the things that they seen when they was in Kemet, and applied it to the alphabet that they was already dealing with. You know what I mean? That's where that came from. Here's a measure that goes into speaking on the Phoenician language, since we were speaking on it a few minutes ago. It says Phoenician was a language originally spoken in the coastal Mediterranean region called Canaan, right? Phoenician, Arabic, Hebrew, and Aramaic, Phoenicia, and Greek, Latin, and Put. In ancient Egyptian, Phoenician is a Semitic language of the Canaanite subgroup. You seen, let me go back here, because I can actually, since I got the screen here. This Moabite stone is written in the same language. When you're talking about, Moabite script and Canaanite, you're talking about the same people in all actuality. Because Canaan really represented the land, and the Moabites were really inhabitants of the land of Canaan, but that's a whole nother measure. But we know Canaan, also had a people that came from them. So that's a drawing. But see, now, this language, again, is the same that is known, again, as Phoenician. This ain't stuff that I got to teach you. Most of the people already know this. People that see it and say, well, I know that aspect right there. But if you don't get the gist of everything being said, go back to the beginning of this video and you're going to see what I have exposed here. So it says that this Semitic language of the Canaanite subgroup, its closest living relative is Hebrew, which is Paleo Hebrew, which is really the same language. It's saying it's very similar. No, it's the same language. So what they call in Paleo Hebrew is really Phoenician, then Aramaic, then Arabic. The area where Phoenician was spoken includes modern-day Lebanon, coastal Syria, Palestine, northern Israel, as well as parts of Cyprus, along with Greece, and at least as a prestige language in some adjacent areas of Anatolia. It was also spoken in the area of Phoenician colonization along the coast of southwestern Mediterranean, include notably those of modern Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, as well as Malta, the west of Sicily and Sardinia and Corsica, and the southernmost of Spain. I proved a lot of this stuff right here a few minutes ago in the pictures I showed. I showed you the Libico Berber. That was basically the same script. I showed you the language of the Etruscans, pardon self. Phoenician is currently known, it says, from a brief, unvaried inscriptions of official and religious character and occasional glosses in books written in other language. Roman authors such as Sallust allude to some books written in Punic. It says, but none have survived except occasionally in translation, Amago's treatise, or in snippets. It says in Plautus' plays. It says Scipio of Melkart, discovered in Malta in 1694, were inscribed in two languages, ancient Greek, Carthaginian. This made it possible for French scholar Abbe Bartholomew, right, to decipher, right, and reconstruct Carthaginian alphabet, which I showed you the Carthaginian alphabet is the same alphabet. I showed you that the Punic alphabet is the Carthaginian alphabet, same alphabet. You see? So it says further, since the trade agreement was found in 1964, written between the Etruscans and a group of Phoenicians, more Etruscan has been deciphered because the Etruscan language again is the Phoenician language. So of course they can decipher. It's the European with this demarcation that have been trying to separate our people and separate, certain things that has caused a setback when it comes to translate certain things. It says notable features. The Phoenician alphabet consists of 22 letters, many of which have a number of different forms and does not indicate vowel sounds. The name of the letters are the same as those used in Hebrew. So I ain't got to go through this, and read all. Then they got the Proto-Canaanite language and all that up there as well. They even talk about this here too. When they go into these measures, so it's powerful. But I want to get back to our slide again because I'm getting ready to close out in a little bit. I just put this out in the media the other day, and this is the very basis and the reason why I'm demonstrating this particular live here. Because after I posted this, it was a lot of controversy concerning this special measure. Because I keep telling them, for one, the original language was not pictorial in the Kemetic language. It was the Hieratic script. This is the Hieratic script. This is the actual alphabet. That's not hieroglyphics, family. You see, even though some people think that this was a glyph and in regards to dealing, this is not pictorial script here. Then you have what they call the Emporia script. This Emporia script is also known as Demotic. You see? Then you have what is called the Hecopter script. What a lot of people are calling now Greek. And I proved that this Hecopter script is not Greek, as they are calling it, but it comes from the original people. This was the writing of the ancient Minoans that are known as the Kiftihu. You see, and you can see the connection of the Kiftihu and the Hecopter. Now I'm going to show you the scripts that derive from these scripts. The Meroitic Script, which is a Cushitic script, is related to those of the Hieratic and Demotic scripts. You can see the similarities in this. Kufic Arabic, you see it don't have all the diacritical marks that deal with vowels and all this. It's just as it is. And you see it this way next to this Emporia script, or what is known as Demotic script. You see where the style of Arabic came from. I even have other measures in here to show you the actual alphabets that have been adopted by the Arabs. And this script was written, this script that I'm showing you now, that deals with the Emporia Script. I wish this was during the 700 era, so to speak. You know, so it's a powerful measure. Let me see here. Then we have the misnomer Greek script. That's why I call it misnomer, because it ain't a Greek script. It's really Hecopter. It's the Coptic script now. That's the misnomer. That's the cover-up that I'm telling you about. So we got to stop letting people tell our story. It's time that we tell our own story. You see what I'm saying? Now, I showed this before, but I'm going to show it again. Because as I stated, when we go all the way back up here to the top, and this is special slide, see the hair, the elongated hair. You know, the locks were indigenous, you know, the Kemet. You can see they just have long measures here. But when you deal with these people, the Kiftiu, you know, these particular people, these are the same people that were the original indigenous establishers of what they like to call so-called Greek culture. And so that brings me back to the measure where I say there is no such thing as Greek language or Greek culture apart from the Hecopter, the Coptic. See, this is showing you. And this is from 565, 560 BC. Look at the language that they're writing in, family. A lot of people like to call this Greek alphabet. This is the Coptic alphabet. You see the locks in the brother's head? You see the style of the beard? You see the pointed style on it? All of that is demonstrated right here in this measure. Look, watch this. You see the point on the beard? You know, the same way that is demonstrated down here. You know, you just got a few people with some locks and, you know, they demonstrating, you know, the full beard. They demonstrating the beard game, so to speak. So that's the original people, the original indigenous inhabitants of our people. So I'm tired of hearing you running around here talking about that's some Greek or Romanized. Ain't no Greek or Romanized. Oh, foolish people. This is your people. Stop letting people take credit for the works of your people. And if you don't believe me again, you don't think this your people right here? The Etruscans, who were the original Romans? Huh? Hannibal? Them ain't your people? The Etruscans again? These ain't your people? We they daddy. We they daddy, family. Our people. Our ancestors fathered them, just like they fathered everybody else. You see what I'm saying? Come on, man. Well, if this right here don't convince you, then nothing will. Many gonna be mad because they feel like I'm trying to overthrow their Greekism. You can get your Greek on, you know. You can get your Greek on, but I ain't going that way. I ain't going. Every chance I get, I'm exposing these one. These the original inhabitants of Greek, Greece, and Rome. You know, the ancient Minoans, the Kifitu. You know, the again, Etruscans. These are the ancient people, family. So get your historical record right. Correct your historical database. You know what I mean? And it's going to be more to come. What I want to do at this particular time, I'm going to close out with another portion of the book Stolen Legacy. Because I give honors to our brother G.M. James. He died for bringing this information to our people, because he was a part and parcel of the ecclesia, and he dared to break, the silence and tell the people the truth, and for that, I got to get a brother honors, because he knew the possibility of this special measure of what would take place. So yeah, our brother, he died to bring this information to the manifest. I'm going to give you this particular portion here. This is what the brother said in the aims of this book. He said, the aim of the book is to establish better race relations in the world by revealing a fundamental truth concerning the contribution of the African continent to civilization. It must be borne in mind that the first lesson in the humanities is to make a people aware of their contribution to civilization. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm making you aware of your contribution to civilization, family. And the second lesson is to teach them about other civilizations. That's what I'm doing. I'm teaching you about other civilization, family. It says, by this dissemination of the truth about the civilization of individual peoples, a better understanding amongst them and a proper appraisal of each other should follow. It says, this notion is based upon the notion of the grand mastermind. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Consequently, the book is an attempt to show that the true authors of Greek philosophy were not Greeks, but people of North Africa, commonly called Egyptians. And the praise and honor falsely given to the Greeks for centuries belonged to the people of North Africa. And therefore the African continent, consequently, this theft of the African legacy by the Greeks led to erroneous world opinion that the African continent has made no contribution to civilization and that its people are naturally backward. This is the misrepresentation that has become the basis of race prejudice, which has affected all people of color. For centuries, the world has been misled about the original source of the arts and sciences. For centuries, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle have been falsely idolized as models of intellectual greatness. And for centuries, the African continent has been called the dark continent because Europe coveted the honor of transmitting to the world the arts and sciences. I'm happy to be able to bring this information to the attention of the world so that on one hand, all races and creeds might know the truth and free themselves from these prejudices which have corrupted human relations, and on the other hand, that the people of African origin might be emancipated from their serfdom and inferiority complex and enter upon a new era of freedom in which they would feel like free men with full human rights and privileges. May our brother continue to rise in power. Brother G.M. James, brother, we know you ain't dead. You live on through your works, brother. And we honor you for what you did and honor you for what you continue to do to inspire us, because many generations after me will be still going into that same historical record and bringing it to the manifest. Indeed, our lesson in this special measure has to do with our legacy. Is a stolen legacy, so it's time for us to get, ourselves into the consciousness of the reality of us being a people, a master nation of people, but we have no pride, family. All of those things have been taken from us because we choose to let somebody else continue to tell our story. Like I said, when people are traveling and they supposed to be your oppressor, slave, master slave, breaker slave, holder slave, catcher, whatever you want to call them. When they go to these other places in civilization and they look at you and they see your face engraved, so to speak, in stone, Can you imagine? They lose their mind when they see that, especially when they talk that your history don't begin, except with you being in chains, enslaved on the bottom of a boat somewhere. You see what I'm saying? So when they go out there and see that that's a lie, it shifts their paradigm. So we on the manifest, we're going to keep bringing this truth to the people. And we know that, again, this is enough, evidence that's brought here to give you insight into this Moorish, history that we giving you, because it goes all the way back to dealing with, Carthage and all of that as well, So I just want to say gratitude, family, peace, love, and law at all costs. Unqua Jet Senev, comedically, that means life, health, and prosperity be upon you all. So until the next time, we're going to move up out of this special demonstration. But we can't go to the next level in closing this out until we give you a grand drawing, of that measure that we gave you when we came in here, for those of you who didn't get you didn't get the measure that we brought when we came in here. So we're going to close it out with one of my tracks, the same one that I opened it up with, and we'll take us on out, family.
I'm the seed of a soul-fit executive ruler, and I'm absolute to my people the way I maneuver. Subdue my foe for the circle 7 and scimitar. Carthaginian bloodline, indigenous lord. I'm the seed of a soul-fit executive ruler, and I'm absolute to my people the way I maneuver. Subdue my foe for the circle 7 and scimitar. Carthaginian bloodline, indigenous lord. Supreme law, you know I'm reppin' mad. And you'd rather see me white platinum dressing all black. I'm 70,000 swift angels ride camelback, full of material life that forces 7 acts. And I'm at a straight mandate to the AGS, and I feel the drillings in the flesh, and nevertheless, and I know the best is yet to come through my DNA. God, body, pedigree, I'm just paid away. It's all smoke and dirt and moles in the afterlife. It's hellfire, torment, so devil's walk light. And when you move to and fro within my omnipresence, a man, Lord, ever present, so count your blessings. My ways and means and my methods, my sacred weapons. My muftis on deck and they all stepping through all these L's and phase, deific willing ways. We can raise a nation of 60 million from shallow graves.
Peace and love, family. Love you. More to come.